There are two kinds of people when it comes to the outdoors. There are people who actually know what they're doing, hunters, campers, hikers, people who can survive in the wilderness. And then there's the rest of us. The people who watch one movie about mountains or spend one weekend outside the city and suddenly think we're rugged outdoorsmen. Until about 6 hours later when we realize that we can't start a fire, we forgot half the supplies we need, and something outside the cabin is definitely trying to eat us.
Well, you're going to be up here for a week. Shouldn't you at least brought a gun along for protection?
Protection from what?
Now, this episode of Taxi starts with a big moment for Bobby. He's finally landed an acting job, a commercial. And not just any commercial, a beer commercial. Now, he doesn't have any lines, but that's not really the point. The point is that Bobby spent time shooting the commercial in the mountains. And the experience clearly made an impression on him. Because after a few days of pretending to be a rugged outdoorsman, Bobby decides he really is one. And that leads to the central idea of this episode. Bobby convincing the guys to leave New York behind for a week and go live the simple life in a cabin in the mountains. Which goes about as well as you'd expect for a group of cabbies from New York. With that in mind, welcome back to The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the 7th episode of the 3rd season of Taxi, titled The Call of the Mild. Written by Catherine Green and directed by Jimmy Burrows. But let's see how this one stacks up, starting with the episode overview. So we open this episode with excitement. Bobby booked a commercial and it's coming on TV right then. He doesn't have a single line, but it's a beer ad. And everyone's being real supportive. Except Louie, of course, who says everyone's putting on a show for Bobby. But the ad is the hinge of the episode, because Bobby really liked the location that they shot the ad at. It was up in the mountains. So, after shooting a rugged beer commercial in the mountains, he thinks he can be a rugged man. And what I find funny about this episode is that it was so clearly written by people in the city. Like, if you want to go camping in the woods or the mountains, you go to a campground or you rent a cabin. You know where you are and how to get out. And maybe if you're really roughing it, you do a hike with a pack. City people go and do something, and in their mind, what they're doing is going to a cabin with no electricity and just completely roughing it. When in reality, they're doing what everybody else does, but they just don't think there's anything special about it. Like, I mean, for instance, these guys live in New York City, right? So it's likely that the mountains they went to are like the Catskills. And just to give a frame of reference to people that aren't from New York, the highest peak in the Catskills is 4,200 feet, which is 1,000 feet lower than the entire city of Denver. Just to give you an idea of the mountains they're roughing it. Anyway, Bobby convinces Tony to go to the mountains with him for a week. And Elaine is super worried. She thinks it's a bad idea. She's like, it's the middle of winter. Don't go out into the woods. So she's going to go over to Alex and try to convince him to tell them not to do it. But Alex decides to join the fun. Now, it being winter, Tony's like, I want a place that has a heated pool. And Bobby responds, no, I don't want anything. I don't want any conveniences, no electricity, no phones, nothing. Dumb, dumb, dumb. The good news is Jim's got the perfect place for them that fits all that criteria. His apartment. But they don't obviously end up going there, but they do invite Jim. So Jim's gonna go with them as well. So these four guys end up going to a cabin in the woods in the middle of nowhere. And at first, everything's great. Alex is gonna point out that it's so quiet up there that you can actually hear yourself think. And of course, Jim says, I don't hear anything. And the guy that brought them to the cabin is actually kind of worried about them. He's like, I'll come back and check on you guys in a few days. But Bobby basically shoos them away. No, we'll be fine. We're fine. But the guy's like, did you bring a gun? They're like, no, we don't shoot guns. And he's like, I'm going to give you my rifle. And as he's leaving, he says, you boys are a long way from the city. I hope you know what you're doing. And you can just see the confidence drain from all of them. Well, from 3/4 of them anyway, because Jim is unaffected, as you might expect. Now, one thing I noticed right away was them bringing in a whole bunch of grocery bags. And I was wondering, like, if there's no electricity, where are you putting all this stuff? And then I was thinking, well, maybe it's just food that's perishable that doesn't need to be refrigerated, right? Turns out it is food that needs to be refrigerated. And they come up with a great idea for keeping it cold. It's winter time, right? Let's just leave it outside. And then we get a fun bit with this that goes on longer than you'd actually expect. Basically, they start toting all the grocery bags outside, and then Jim starts bringing them back in. So they keep coming in, grabbing these 3 bags from the table, walking out, and as they're walking out, they don't notice Jim walking in with 3 more bags from outside, so they just keep bringing the same bags back and forth. The question I have is, I know they're from the city, and that's the joke, but really? You don't know that leaving food outside will attract animals? You don't have roaches or rats in the city? Like, what would happen if you left your food outside your apartment door? I mean, people would probably take it, right? But they're gonna go to sleep for their first night. Bobby gets to the bed and all the others sleep on the floor. And when they wake up, we get a bit where Jim doesn't seem to remember where they are or who Alex is or what they do for a living. Alex is going to go out and get some food to get some breakfast for everybody, right? And who'd have seen this coming? He comes back in with a bunch of empty bags and he's like, something ate our food. So they're a little distraught, right? They're like, we're going to die. They come together. Alex is like, I can fish. They convince Tony to be a hunter because he's the only one that's ever shot a gun because he was in the service. And Jim's gonna go forage. I don't know what Bobby's doing. I guess he's staying back to cook whenever they bring stuff back. Seems like he could have gone out too, but he didn't. And of course, Jim is foraging even though he doesn't know what foraging means. But by the time everybody gets back, a winter storm's a brewing. The wind is blowing like crazy and it's starting to snow. Alex is gonna bring back some minnows. Tony comes back empty-handed. And Jim comes back with a bucket of blueberries. Not to be confused with blueberries. And then we get another long bit where they make a play on word with blueberries versus blueberries. And in the next scene, they've all got beard stubble, and we find out they've been hungry for 6 days. Like they haven't eaten in 6 days except for the minnows and the blueberries. That's a long time to go without food. So they're all starving and they're trying not to think about food. Although Jim's going over a list of food that he's not thinking about, much to everyone else's chagrin. And so to get him to stop, they're like, just go out and get some firewood. And while he's out and the others are talking about what they're gonna do, what are we gonna do? Just wait for food to come walking through the door? A turkey walks through the door. Now, when I'm watching this, I'm expecting them to notice and have that be the bit, but they didn't. But Jim notices as he's walking back in and the turkey is walking out. And he starts trying to call it with like lip pursing noises, like the kissing sound. And then Alex is gonna be like, Jim, what are you doing? And instead of explaining why he's making those kissing noises, he just turns to Alex and makes the kissing noises. No, Jim, why are you making that sound? He's like, well, I'm trying to lure him in. So they go and take a look and they're like, oh shit, it's a turkey. And they get all excited and they're like running out there. They want to catch it or whatever. And they're like, no, wait, obviously we should get the gun. And they spend a sort of long time being like, well, who should shoot it? Alex should shoot it because he's already holding the gun. And I get it. It's just for the show, but like this turkey would have left. I'm sorry. This turkey would have been long gone at this point. But also, nobody wants to shoot the turkey, right? Alex clearly doesn't either. So I thought the bit was going to be like that they couldn't go through with it. But he kills it. They cook it. So they also must have defeathered it because they didn't show feathers on the cooked turkey. But as they all sit down to eat the turkey, we get one more misdirect. Jim is going to insist on saying a prayer and giving thanks. And he gives like a really passionate soliloquy about the beautiful life of this bird. And everybody feels guilty about it. They're sort of looking away. They don't even want to look at the bird while he's doing this. And I really thought that this bit was going to be, now they can't go through with eating it. But as soon as the speech ends, they dive at it ravenous. So at this point, we're going to cut back to the garage. And Elaine is worried about them. She even asks Louie to call her if he hears from them. And just like that, Louie gets a call from Alex. And this is where shit gets weird. It was funny at first, but then it just took like a turn into nightmarish. Basically, Louie is going to use the phone call as an excuse to get Elaine into his cage. Then he's going to close the door and start slowly pulling down the blinds. And this is happening all while she's talking with Alex on the phone. Then we're going to hear a scream and a slapping sound, and Elaine leaving the cage and the blinds open. And Elaine is obviously really pissed off and storming out of the garage. And then we see Louie hanging on the wall by his pants or underwear or something. And it's also that he can just end on the joke of Louie saying into the phone, yeah, she did seem upset. What did you say to her? But that's the whole episode. Let's see how it ranked.
Oh, rank.
So the rank is where I rank the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. But before I dive into the rankings, I just want to say if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, the first category is story. So story-wise, it's pretty decent. Bobby is interested in having a rustic mountain getaway after spending some time in the mountains for a commercial shoot, and then the other guys decide to join him. Having them starve for 6 days is a little dark, but it's a good story. I gave it a 4.25. So that brings us to acting. I didn't have any issue with the acting. I thought everyone was pretty good, actually, including Jeff Conaway, who I'm starting to enjoy more and more, thankfully. I gave it a 4.5. And that brings us to dialogue. Now, most of the aspects of this episode were pretty good. The story was kind of fun. The acting was good. It was engaging. It just wasn't very funny. Thankfully, even though it didn't make me laugh a ton, it did spread those laughs throughout the episode. so it didn't feel as much like I just wasn't laughing. Also, what is the deal with writing Louis as such a weird predator? Anyway, I gave it a 2. So that brings us to episode coherence. I mean, other than it being crazy that these city guys would put themselves in this position, or that they didn't know that animals would eat their food if they put it outside, it's pretty coherent. And it's all a bit exaggerated, but you know, in that way, it's also coherent. I gave it a 4.25. So that brings us to character relatability. They're almost a little too dumb in this one. And it's hard to relate to people who are just collectively morons. Now, I feel like if they had Jim take all the food outside without the other guys knowing, and then have everybody lament that the food was gone then, that might have been more relatable. But nobody of the 4 of them thought to speak up about bringing the food outside. Still though, I think the underlying emotions are fairly relatable. I gave it a 2.5. So some decent rankings, some not great. If it has a decent laugh counter, it'll definitely make it into the top 3 tiers. But unfortunately, this was a single digit episode. It only got me 9 times, which means it had a grand total of 26.5, which makes it a mediocre. So hopefully next week they'll come back with a vengeance. But as for the series average, it's at a 27.18, which keeps it as a mediocre. And if you're ranking along with me, drop your score in the comments. So thanks for listening and or watching. Check out my other taxi ranking episodes or any of my other sitcom or movie ranking episodes on this channel. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. And for up-to-date rankings, you can check out my website at therankpodcast.com, where you can also email me at john@therankpodcast.com. And if you really want to support the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast. But I will leave you with this. So what did Jim say when he saw the turkey in the cabin?
Well, what did he say?
Wow, 3 strikes in a row. So I've got 2 jokes here, Antonio. I don't think either of them are very good. You can choose which one is better from like the least worst option.
They're all equally bad.